Today, I am day 6. I feel tender, but renewed. 10 years ago, if you had told me that I would intimately know my menstrual cycle, the power and the promise of every day within it, that I would no longer suffer mental and physical period problems, I wouldn't have believed you. Now, before half of you think this talk is not for you, every single one of us knows someone who suffers from period pain, perimenopause, PMT. Every single one of us knows someone who has been on the receiving end of premenstrual rage. Period problems affect us all, and our health, our relationships, our economy, and even our planet is at stake. Back in 2015, periods for me were more like a blueprint for a bomb than a blueprint for saving the world. I was 35. I felt like I was being battered by wave after wave after wave of despair. I had no resources left. I was burnt out. So I went to the doctor. I reeled off a long list of symptoms that were frankly ruining my life, ruining my work, ruining my relationship with my husband and with my children. The doctor diagnosed me with long-term depression and prescribed antidepressants. Now, the box of pills remained unopened for a week or so. And it was at this point that I realized that my symptoms had completely shifted. Was this all because of my period? If this is my natural cycle, why is it so dysfunctional, so full of suffering? I realized I didn't know what was going on in my body at all. And I would later realize that the suffering, the layers and layers of guilt and menstrual shame can not only be prevented, but we can put knowledge and power in its place. I've spent the last 6 years researching the menstrual cycle from a sociological and historical perspective. I've trained with world leaders in non-clinical menstrual health. And as a menstrual cycle consultant, I have worked with a number of people who are also suffering with their menstrual cycle. One person had taken an accidental overdose of painkillers for the period pain that she was suffering, and she was afraid to miss work and lose her job. A mother of a 14-year-old came to me because her daughter was suffering from such outbursts of rage, it was affecting the entire family dynamic. A teacher was suffering because she was expected to stand for most of the day in front of the class with a heavy bleed, far from a toilet, and didn't know what to do about it. Now, there's a few stats here, but I'm going to draw out a couple for you. So, 1 in 3 menstruators have been diagnosed with menstrual dysfunction. And menstrual dysfunction is anything with your menstrual cycle that compromises your work, education, family, or social life. 1 in 3. And yet this figure seems inaccurately low because of what we know of how long it takes to diagnose several of the period problems. It takes 8 years on average to diagnose endometriosis. It takes 12 years on average to diagnose PMDD. And the British Medical Journal tells us that 80% of menstruators go to work or school whilst feeling unwell on their periods, and perhaps not surprisingly, are less productive as a result. 80% of menstruators in the UK say they are unwell. We are in a pandemic of period problems. And the last 2 years has revealed something, perhaps for the first time, about our collective period problems. In the last 2 years, 64% of menstruators have reported an increase in menstrual dysfunction. And the reason why? Because of the prolonged stress of living through a pandemic. Stress. So stress is exacerbating our menstrual symptoms, and our menstrual symptoms are exacerbating our stress. This horrible cycle is holding back our relationships, our children, our mental health, and our potential. Perhaps what this tells us is the most pressing period problem is society. The stresses it brings, its inhospitality and inaccessibility to menstruators. We are not disordered. We are not dysfunctional. Society is. So what can we do about it? The first source of hope lies in the menstrual cycle itself. In my apprenticeship with menstruality pioneers Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Wurlitzer of the Red School, I learned that when we track and respect the menstrual cycle, we can relieve stress and suffering for us all. This is an archetypal menstrual cycle. It's a naturally regenerative cycle of 2 halves. A rise in outward energy in the first half, a decline in outward energy in the second half. It has 2 poles: ovulation, peak outward full production energy; menstruation, peak inward restorative energy. It has 4 distinct phases, much like the seasons of the year. Spring, roughly the first week after menstruation, that's a rising, playful pre-ovulation energy. Summer, ovulation, that's the superhero mother, colleague, friend can spin 100 plates while doing a dance and staying up all night. Autumn, premenstruum, drawing down, sorting out, taking no shenanigans. Winter, hibernation, menstruation. But in our 24/7 consumerist culture, there's no space or time for menstrual rest, but there's not even time for a teacher to go to the toilet. And we can see the tension of a natural cycle under stress in the autumn. That's that premenstrual rage, which occurs, in my experience, because we're still going at full summertime pelt. Yeah, our system is asking us to slow down for survival. We can all see how our culture of perpetual productivity is contributing to climate change, mass extinction, systemic environmental collapse. Our menstrual cycle is guiding us to live more sustainably. And more research is needed, but what we're seeing is that the more rest we can get at menstruation, the more productive we can become throughout the rest of the cycle. And this has certainly been the case for me. In the last 6 years, I have completely redesigned my life and my work around my menstrual cycle. I know what day I'm on because now I chart my cycle on a daily basis. And I share what day I'm on with my family, including my children, my colleagues, and now all of you. So you can better support me with whichever energy I bring. I take some time for menstrual rest. What does that look like? That simply means I don't do anything during my period that's just not urgent. And it turns out a lot of things can wait. This is what it means to live with the menstrual cycle as a guide. And it works. My menstrual suffering has disappeared. My cycle is thriving. My family is thriving. And completely bonkers, as you can see. There is hope. And there's also hope because there's help available. Because of the taboo that still surrounds menstruation, the first port of call is often the doctor. So I thought, what if people with period problems, like me, instead of solely being prescribed pills, were prescribed help to chart, reframe, even embrace their menstrual cycle? And what if they could self-refer? So I set up the organisation Menstrual Cycle Support to help people with period or menopausal problems to be referred to an online, supportive menstrual mentor and community for help to track and understand their cycle. It's the first time in the world that non-clinical menstrual support is available through the doctor's surgery. And I will not stop until every menstruator in the UK has access to this vital support. The hope is that when we chart our cycles, we can be empowered when we go to the doctor. We can speed up those unacceptable diagnosis times. We can reduce waiting lists. We can reduce wasted GP appointments, and we can empower patients to make informed choices. And since menstrual cycle support started this year here in Cornwall, the results have been transformative. Again, the participants have reported that their mental and physical pain has become more manageable, their suffering has dissipated, and knowledge and power has taken its place. Now, the help that I have made available is only a tiny part of the help that is emerging in the growing global menstrual movement. In femtech, an industry said to be worth $60 billion in the next decade is led by menstrual tracking apps. It was coined by Ida Tin, the founder of the app Clue. Flow, another menstrual tracking app, has 100 million users. And digital tracking is giving every menstruator with access to a smartphone or device the opportunity to easily track their cycle and chart their symptoms. In sport, The US World Cup winning football team attributed their success to tracking and training around their cycles. This has inspired millions of menstruators to consider the impact that their cycle is having on their own health, performance, and productivity. In science, stem cells have been discovered recently in menstrual blood, giving hope for cancer research. In art, TV, film, journalism, the menstrual movement is emerging. From the Oscar-winning documentary about Padman to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry contributing to a menstruation charity for their wedding. And we're seeing menstrual activism in Africa and all over the world to address period poverty. We're seeing successful campaigns to offer free products to entire countries, to end tampon tax, and to lower plastic product pollution. The menstrual movement is everywhere. I'm standing on a menstrual cycle right now. The movement is everywhere, and it needs a name. I call it menstrualism, and this is our third source of hope for period problems. Menstrualism is powered by the menstrualists, people who prioritize the menstrual cycle. And it's not just the high-profile taboo busters. It's also, a menstrualist is also your friend who talks about her period in front of others, your colleague who refuses to go to work while she is in pain simply because she is bleeding. It's because of the menstrualist that I can stand here right now and talk to you so openly about period problems. It's because of the menstrualists that there is hope. Hope for equality. Hope for a healthier, happier, less stressed out world. And there's hope because of you. I am day 6. This simple knowledge of knowing what day we are on and what day others around us is on is the starting point to end menstrual suffering. The menstrual cycle is not a blueprint for a bomb. It's a guide that can sustain us to better serve the people and the planet that we love. With menstrual knowledge, we may not take away the pain, but we can take away the shame. With this knowledge, we get power. We get choices. Choices to rest, even for a moment. Choices to enable those around us to rest, even for a moment. Choices to say yes to our natural cycles and step into our power. When we do this, we model a way of living and being that our world desperately needs right now. Thank you.